All right, folks, welcome to the
Fifth
live Q&A that we've done. We really enjoy doing these, and it's nice to interact with folks in real time and answer the hot questions that are on people's mind at that time of year that they're asking them. My name is Joe Segrist. I'm president of Purple Martin Conservation Association, and with me is Mercedes. Mercedes, you want to introduce
Hello.
yourself?
I'm Mercedes, and I'm the research manager at the PMCA.
All right. So, we put out a call to get questions like a week or two ago, a couple weeks ago maybe.
A couple weeks ago.
I've got a little nagging cough, so I apologize if I sound a little weird sometimes. Sometimes I'm like, so I'm not going to throw up. I'm just trying to not cough on the mic. Anyway, the topics for this one were attracting purple martins, colony management, best practices, more just kind of what's on everybody's mind here in spring as our martins are returning, and it's hard to believe that we just got our first martin back yesterday here at our research colonies in Erie, Pennsylvania, but folks down in, say, Florida already have eggs, and it shocks me every year. It shouldn't shock me at all, the time difference between northern and southern parts of the range, but I don't know. We're barely even touching spring here. The grass is just starting to get a little green. So, all right, so we can just jump right into some questions here. First one here. We've got pre-submitted questions, obviously, but please submit your questions in chat. We're monitoring chat. If you want more clarification on stuff we say, you can ask about that, or even new questions altogether. We will answer your questions once we burn through these pre-submitted questions. So, first one here, Joshua asks, can you guide me on the best ways of using decoys and recordings this spring? So these are attraction tools, as we refer to them. Plastic purple martin decoys and playing audio playback of a purple martin dawn song or even daytime chatter are like the most powerful things that you can use to attract purple martins beyond just putting your purple martin housing in the right place and having housing with the right characteristics. So if you've got everything right as far as where you put it and the housing, that's what you need to be doing. So decoys, the best way to use decoys, you want to have, probably more than one is ideal. You certainly don't need to make it look like a full flock of purple martins, but the reason this technique works is purple martins want to nest colonially. They don't want to be the first one or the only one nesting in a site. So, it helps to attract martins in when they see those silhouettes, they hear the calls. It helps them to feel like they're not the only ones there. So, have more than one ideally mounted on, the perch rods or the hanging arms, but also have the dawn song playing. It's a song that the martins sing first thing in the morning. Really they start before the sun comes up and they go for a couple hours, but the dawn song works throughout the day. Really, anytime you could play it, you should. What I always say to folks is play it for as long and as loud as you can get away with, because the louder it is, the farther it travels in the air, so you're going to be pulling martins from farther away. So as long and as loud as you can, obviously not at night, but you can certainly start a little bit before sunrise and as loud as you can do it. Decoys, sometimes particularly if you're using decoys to distract predators, which decoys can also be useful to act as a decoy for owls and hawks. It sometimes helps to move those around a few times throughout the season, so they don't learn that, oh, that's a plastic one there that's always facing that direction. Garrett in Southeast Texas asks, it's my first year trying to establish a colony. How common is it for a single ASY male to roost alone with no other birds in the colony. Mercedes, you want to take that while I take a drink?
Sure. So when you're first trying out, trying to get a colony, you might just have, one bird to start, that arrives and starts your colony. And that first bird can be male or female. But if you have a male there roosting alone, he's probably going to be singing that dawn song that Joe just talked about in the morning to try to attract a female to the colony. And it may or may not be successful if there's no other martins nearby. And, it can take a couple years to grow your colony, and you might just have, one show up the first year. Hopefully it comes back next year and brings, might attract more birds the following year. But it's not uncommon when you first start your colony to have lower numbers of birds.
Yeah, I don't think it's uncommon to start off with just a pair. And sometimes that starts off with just a solo male trying to find that lady out there. So. Ken asked, is there any research on which route purple martins take to migrate to Saskatchewan? Lydia, would you mind pulling up the scout map, please? All right, can you bigify that and then zoom out a little bit? Actually, let's zoom in a little bit. All right, that's pretty good. Go down to the Amazon. All right, so purple martins, our eastern purple martins in particular, they're overwintering here really in the heart of the Amazon. Some of the areas down here in the southern Amazon that have been deforested and are repurposed for agricultural use now, purple martins will be down in there a little bit as well. But primarily we're talking like right through here for eastern purple martins. But so the purple martins, as they're migrating back north up to where our empty martin houses are waiting for them, they really are going as fast as they can to cut back. So Lydia, can you start to kind of scooch us up towards Saskatchewan, please? So they'll cross over, they'll cross over the mountain ranges here in the northern part of South America. And typically you'll have them cut this little gap right here rather than follow the land path. This is nothing to a purple martin. They'll do this in a day easy, just a couple hours, really. So they'll take the little shortcut there. Sometimes they'll do a little shortcut here. And usually, bring this down some more here, Lydia.
Sorry, just 1 second, I'm adjusting the light.
Oh, we got some glare, sorry. Hold, please. We need a touch screen.
You can pretend it's a touch.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah. Okay, that's perfect. All right, so as far as martins that are up here in Saskatchewan, the western parts of the range here in the United States as well, in Alberta and even Manitoba, they're usually not going to do this shoot right off of the Yucatan and over to the Gulf Coast. Usually those birds to this western part, they'll stick to the land route here and come around on the Mexico side and then pretty much straight up to wherever they're headed to. So that's kind of the route that they'll go. Typically they follow this kind of a path, not really meandering over these parts of the Great Plains and into the Rockies. Usually they're kind of hugging here and swinging left. As far as their migration south, so the migration north is like they are hustling. They're going as fast as they can. From the time they leave to the time they get back is only about 3 weeks. So if we're about 3 weeks probably away from your martins returning up north, they probably just left on their trip from the Amazon. And then as far as the reverse trip, it's kind of just a repeat of that, although can you come back up a little bit north, Lydia? Perfect. They will have like a 1 month to a month and a half stopover in these tropical forested areas of the Yucatan Peninsula and or Honduras and Nicaragua. So they hustle down here, they're out of harm's way from the winter weather, and they have a quick recovery there for about a month, month and a half before they continue on down. And the way that we know that is from using little things like this, GPS data loggers that we, as part of our research program, ourselves and with our research partners across the U.S. and Canada and even Brazil, deploy these tags on purple martins pretty much every year to better understand the timing of the pass that they take, the routes, and then the important areas of habitat that they're using to better understand them, because purple martins actually spend more time away from our backyards than they do here. They really are tropical birds that come up to our neck of the woods to breed and then head back to the tropics. So without understanding better what they're doing down here in Central and South America, we can't hope to conserve them. You know, you can't just know what they're doing in their breeding range and hope to save the species. So that's how we know that, that's why we know that, and that's how they get to Saskatchewan. All right, Reb asks, what's the proper time and method for lowering housing for nest checks without disturbing the birds? Mercedes, you have a lot of experience with this, taking care of our research colonies, so you want to take it?
Sure. So nest checks are when you lower down your housing and you take a look at the nest inside. A lot of people, like to record their nest contents. We recommend that you do a nest check once a week just to look in on the health of your colony, see if there's any issues that need addressed so you have the most successful flood rates at the end of your season. But as far as methods and proper time, anytime during the day, you just want to avoid lowering the housing really early in the morning, because the birds typically, the females especially, overnight in there. You just want to give them the chance to leave on their own, and then not during dusk or in the evening time when they've settled in for the night. So anytime during the day, they're out feeding. They're not going to abandon the nest if you lower it and check in on things. They might come back and make a lot of noise, but they typically will just land nearby and watch and go right back in as soon as you get the housing up. You also don't want to leave the housing down too long. Just take a quick look inside and raise it back up, and the birds are fine with it.
Yeah, and you want to not do it if it's rainy or any kind of poor weather to where the martins really
if it's real cold,
ought to be in there.
You don't want to kick them out.
Definitely not in cold weather. All right. Robert asks, do you have any research that shows what martins do during migration when they encounter a snowstorm before they've reached the nest sites or claimed a gourd or housing unit? So martins heading north, and this is happening more and more. They're encountering unseasonable weather, winter storms when it typically would have been nicer spring weather. What I think you might be asking about is, do they turn around and head back south? And we are actually looking at that to see exactly what they do, because, right, you guys maybe will see martins in your backyard. You have some really crappy cold weather, and the martins are gone. So where did they go? Did they turn around and go back south? Are they somewhere else? And believe it or not, we don't have a ton of data yet on what we refer to as reverse migration. So martins running into poor weather, do they turn back south and wait it out? Part of that is just the luck of the draw. So we have to have one of these tags on a bird that survives that runs into one of these situations. So it would have to be the earliest returning ones to your colony, right? Because you'll have martins returning your colony over the course of like a month. So we would have to luck out and have it on a bird that's one of the first ones back, and then luck out as far as data goes, but certainly unlucky for the martin that it's one that runs into this poor weather. We anecdotally have seen some turn around and head back south, but we're still collecting. We don't have enough data, enough instances of northward migration in our data set yet to really draw any conclusions from it. Another issue why we don't always have the tracks during this time. Sometimes the tags stop recording data halfway down, battery runs too low, we run into technical issues like that. So usually that spring migration is the one we probably have the least data on, and we're looking to continue to grow that data set. But it's definitely something that we're trying to understand better. Like I said, anecdotally we've seen some cases, but not enough to say with any certainty. All right. James asked, when do martins start nest building in Kentucky? Do both male and female stay in the nesting box before, during, and after they make a nest? Mercedes, you manage the Project Martin Watch a data set that folks from all across the range send in their nest records, so you're the perfect person to ask this question.
So I looked at a few of those records, and it looked like on average martins start nest building in Kentucky like mid-April through the end of April. It looked like first eggs are kind of beginning of May. And then do both male and female stay in the nesting box before, during, or after they make a nest? So we've actually learned from our live nest cam. If you haven't watched already, you'll have to look out for that this summer, where we stream video of the live nest here. But it seemed like it can vary whether they stay in the box overnight. Usually the female does. Sometimes both male and female do, but a lot of times the male, he goes in like a tree nearby, maybe another gourd overnight. The female, she stays through the night to incubate on the eggs. When the nestlings hatch, she was usually in there most of the time too. Sometimes when the nestlings are ready to fledge and you've got like a full gourd of big babies in there, she might not stay overnight, but and kind of encourages them to leave the nest towards the end there. But yeah, it can vary, but it seems like the females tend to stay.
Yeah, up until hatching, for sure. The male martins do what's called mate guarding, and they'll kind of oh gosh, how can I put this without putting an anthropomorphic spin on it? Sometimes there's forced copulation by males in a colony, so they're there to kind of keep the female that they've mated with from having that happen to them, because the males are going to be investing a lot of energy and risk in taking care of these nestlings. A lot of feeding, so a lot of energy taxing on themselves, as well as kind of trying to defend from predators, and they would like to ensure that it's their genetics that are in those eggs, so they just kind of hang around. Once the eggs hatch, they don't have quite as vigilant a guarding, I don't think, but everybody's busy feeding so much at that point anyway. But usually up until egg laying, for certain, the males are sticking pretty close to that female. Dale and Lori asked, what do you recommend to combat mite infestations? Mercedes, you manage our research colonies. You want to let them know what we do to manage mites?
Yes, so we recommend doing a nest change for mites. We don't recommend using any type of pesticide in the nest, but a nest change involves taking, putting some clean material in a bucket, taking the nestlings out of the nest, putting them in the bucket, and then removing all of the nesting material from the cavity and replacing it with clean nesting material, and then you put those nestlings right back in the cavity that they came from. So it's best to do it, one nest at a time, so you can make sure you're putting those nestlings back into the correct cavity. It's not something that you have to do, but if you're doing those weekly nest checks and you notice that a nest might really have a lot of mites, kind of everywhere, they're just tiny little black specks crawling everywhere, you can do that nest change, and that can really help the nestlings thrive better. So
yeah, it's really all about trying to interrupt that kind of exponential growth that insects undergo, and if you can kind of throw a wrench in it in the middle of things, so as soon as your birds are nesting, the mites and the fleas and the lice and everything that are on just living within their feathers, kind of take hold in the nesting material, and will start to reproduce from there. They feed on typically the blood from the nestlings and adults, although there are some parasites that feed on feathers and skin cells and other stuff like that. Those just kind of start to take hold then. And like I said, it's an exponential growth. So, they have a bajillion babies, and then once those reach the breeding age, those will have a bajillion babies, and then it goes like crazy. So if you can, in the middle, just kind of interrupt that population skyrocketing, that really, sets it back long enough for your nestlings to make it out of there before things get crazy. And parasites are a normal part of life for wild birds and wild animals in general. So to have a sterile environment in there, actually, some research is showing that that's not a great thing as far as the normal development of their immune system, and other things beyond that even. So just having those natural conditions in there as best as possible can be beneficial in the long term, even though it's kind of gross. You want to see these birds as comfortable as your cat or your dog in your house. But these birds have to be tough. They have a whole lot of hard things in their life after they leave your nest. And potentially having a sterile condition in there where there's not a single bug in sight, and they don't have that natural exposure, can really potentially set them back as far as their long-term survival. So a lot of research is ongoing with that, but that's just something to consider, that as much as we hate it, and sometimes it'll take an extra round of nest replacement.
Mm-hmm.
It's not ideal that we have to do this, but sometimes if you get really wet conditions in there, things will skyrocket. And certainly if folks are concerned, we recommend that they use nest replacements.
That's something too. The nest replacement's good for if it gets wet inside, even if you don't have parasites. If it gets really wet, it might be a good idea to do that nest replacement.
Yeah, if it gets really nasty in there, muddy, wet, poop everywhere, and that gets on the developing feathers, sometimes that can be an issue for those birds first fledging, if their feathers are kind of caked up and not in the normal contours, or they had a lot of lice or something that were chewing on them because of poor conditions in there, that could potentially interfere with those first flights.
Yeah.
So that's another reason why we recommend regular nest checks, is to watch out when those conditions arise, and you can help to step in. Stuart asks, trying to start a new colony, should I start with starling resistant openings or round ones? We really recommend across the board starling resistant entrances. I can understand where this question is coming from, because purple martins are like us. They want to do what's easiest. If you give them a martin house with round openings and an identical one that has starling resistant openings, they're probably going to use that round opening one first. They're less worried about going through it. When you first have martins come and encounter starling resistant entrances, you'll see a lot of stick with halfway in. They're wiggling around, they're acting like they can't fit through. They can, but they want to make sure they don't get stuck instinctually. So there's like a hesitancy there, and I can understand that the people thinking, I should start off with round and then switch to starling resistant, because I don't want to deter martins that are first coming. And really, due to the, if martin housing was free and it was easy, maybe that's what you do, right? Especially if you don't have a starling issue that's really pressing. But really, due to the challenges of how expensive this martin housing can be, and the potential amount of work and change to the colony, when you make that switch later on. We recommend just starting with starling resistant entrances and being done with it there. You can cut your headaches in half. Nothing will help to keep a sparrow out of there, but you can take care of starlings with one little click when you're ordering martin housing and save yourself a heck of a lot of headache later for when those martins do show up, or those starlings potentially do show up if you have round entrances. All right. Stephen Janice asked, after over 35 years of hosting a martin colony in our pasture, we realized that we might need to move to a smaller place soon. What's the responsible thing to do concerning our gourds if we have to say goodbye to our friends? This is a tough situation, and we talk with folks about this kind of all the time, right? We've got to move. We're moving to a retirement home, or for whatever reason, we've got to move to a place that doesn't have space for a martin colony, or we're moving to a place that doesn't have martins because it's a different part of the range. What should we do? And it sounds like, luckily with Steve and Janice here, that they've got some time to make a change. It's not like they're heading out of town next year. So, the ideal for the martins probably would be to have whoever moves into that location be as passionate about martins as you are and take care of that colony just like you were. If for some reason that's not going to be the case, ideally that housing is provided elsewhere nearby, right? If you could set up martin housing, or even that martin housing at a neighbor's residence somewhere nearby, talk to public parks, talk to communities, see if they have public property somewhere that you can put a martin housing on. Just try to get that housing installed elsewhere in the area if you can. What you really don't want to have happen is all that martin housing is still there, and the person that moves in just lets it go and it turns into a sparrow factory. You definitely don't want that to be the case. So ideally it stays, and you're selling the place to somebody who's passionate. And we've had some people that are selling their houses, and that's like a criteria, and we're not going to sell it unless somebody can take care of it. But realistically, that's probably pretty rare that that's the case, that you can guarantee that. So setting up colonies nearby is probably the most responsible thing to do, and then those martins have somewhere else to go. All right, Karen asks, I have purple martins for many years in Texas, but they moved to south central Colorado and have seen no martins. Are there any hopes of martins moving this way? Lydia, could you pull up the range map, please?
Excuse me.
Looking at it. Oh, sorry. Below is a picture, or no, the range map, sorry.
Oh, that's awesome. Thinking of the tiny map.
All right. Scroll on down. Not that one. That's the one. All right. As you can see, here we are in Colorado. And what they say, they're east central. Is that what they said? South central. All right. So you're down here. This is the range of the eastern purple martin. This is the one that you're used to from Texas that has purple martin, needs purple martin housing to survive, to nest in. They don't nest naturally anywhere in this purple range. They only nest in human provided housing. You do have some green here, and those are what we believe to be western purple martins, which is a different subspecies that still clings to the nesting habitats that eastern martins used to do when this was a whole forested part of the continent. So there are martins there. They're not as densely populated as this would make it look, right? Purple martins are pretty dense in parts here. This is solid purple, this is solid green, but it's really kind of sparse how populated they are there. But they are in the forests, on the mountains, nesting in woodpecker holes, like the other, the eastern subspecies used to. So, your purple martins are not the purple martins that you're used to. You're gonna have to go find them. I would recommend maybe using eBird to go and see them, see where people are reporting purple martins in your area of Colorado, but you're not going to get them in your backyard. Putting up housing will not get them to nest there. They don't have that need to do so, and they don't recognize it. And you're too far west to get these eastern martins to come on over. So kind of a cool opportunity, but you're not going to have those backyard martins that you came to love so much in Texas. All right. John asked, should purple martin landlords be concerned about the bird flu that has recently been in the news? Yes. Not yes, they should be concerned. That was fun. Yes, this is a good question, is what my yes was. Don't put that out of context. So, highly pathogenic avian influenza has definitely been in the news. It's referred to as bird flu sometimes, colloquially, and it is a big concern across the birding world, but also just public health. And it's something that's being watched very closely. Is it a concern for purple martin? No, there's not a single case reported of highly HPAI, as it's called, in purple martins. So it's not an immediate concern as far as purple martins being killed by it or being transferred from purple martins to humans. It's possible that there's more of a risk of it going the other way, honestly. But it's more of an issue for game birds, poultry, and scavengers eating other birds that have died of it and contracting it that way. So purple martins hanging to themselves, eating only flying bugs, they're not really encountering HPAI in the environment. And it just seems to not be something that targets them as a species. Can that change in the future? Absolutely. I mean, as we found out through the past 5 years, viruses mutate all the time and can change. So it's something that we're certainly keeping an eye on to see if that changes. And we will absolutely, if something changes in the concern that we have that the purple martin landlords need to know about, we will absolutely be putting that out both to our membership, through our magazine, through emails, through our social media. You can rest assured that we are going to let people know if there's a concern associated with purple martins. But as far as personal protection that you can take out there, we actually recommend that folks dealing with purple martins just take normal precautions that you would outside. Use it, encountering any sort of droppings of a wild animal. So rubber gloves, dust masks, if you've got a lot of airborne dust, are useful. Using a sanitizer, cleaning and sanitizing the housing after the season is always useful. And it helps to give the martins a nice clean spot to come back to. Nobody who has any sort of immunocompromised condition should be dealing with purple martins or feeding birds or really, doing anything that, puts them into contact with wild animals, just across the board. So if you have any kind of immunocompromising conditions, or probably the people in your household should not be interacting with birds in birdhouses or bird feeders. That's a recipe for a problem. So, long story short, bird flu is not affecting purple martins and is not a current concern of ours, but we are watching vigilantly. Brian asks, are we expecting that with climate changes we'll see arrivals earlier than last season or normal? Mercedes also manages our scout arrival study, and she may be able to share. I know I didn't talk about you talking about this one,
Yeah.
but you wanna share what we've seen over the last few years?
Yeah, I guess overall, on average, the migration is pretty much, staying the course is what we have on our timing map that you can look to see when they're going to arrive to your area. But I think this year is a good example of just like those first arrivals arriving early. I've talked to just a lot of pro-Martin landlords that they don't even have their housing up. I just heard so many stories. If they don't have their housing up, they're just outside with their dog or just for whatever reason, and then they hear the Purple Martin and they're like, they're here already, like 2 or 3 weeks early. So, we don't really have like a direct answer as to why like this year that seems to be happening, but certainly the milder winter and
we'll talk to people that have had their birds come early, and then we'll answer the phone and it'll be somebody whose birds are late.
yes.
Overall, there may be a little bit nudging earlier of timing, but that's usually kind of something that's pushed back by winter weather events. So we may have a couple of mild springs, and these Purple Martins are all about hustling back and getting back as soon as they can. They're just like hardwired to do that because they don't know that all of the gourds are pretty much the same. They're coming back instinctually and are going to fight for that best woodpecker hole. And they don't want to be stuck with the woodpecker hole that's next to the owl nest. So they're hustling back as quick as they can. When they leave South America, they don't have any inkling. There's no way of them knowing what the weather's like when they're going to get back here. And they go nonstop. So they're hustling back. You get a couple of years in a row in a particular area where it's been kind of mild. We've had a couple of warm springs in a row without these kind of big winter storms in a particular part of the country. And those birds start to creep back genetically. That the genetics of migration timing are kind of what drives when they're going to arrive, when they depart South America. And you get back early, maybe you have more babies, you get the best sites. Then you got more of those genetics in the population, and things kind of start to cheat a little earlier. But then you have one of these big winter storms one year that really just kind of blasts through and takes out those early arrivals, and that's something that we're seeing more and more as the climate is unstable and unpredictable, especially in this spring weather. So you get this kind of back and forth. This really kind of awful to deal with, right? You get these martins that are just like so excited to come back early. It's going to be an early spring. We're going to eat all these bugs, and then it's one of those years that the winter storm gets them. So something that a lot of our research is focused on is understanding the flexibility in that timing and maybe how Purple Martins are going to fare moving forward as the climate continues to change. All right. This is kind of a continuation of that question that I maybe just covered. All right. Jim asked, he had a colony site 15 years ago. Then 4 years ago, there's a tropical storm that took down one of his houses, so it cut the colony in half. Then last year, he had only 2 nesting pair and 0 pair so far this year. Where have the martins gone? So that's a big question, right? We get calls all the time for people who are like, my martins aren't here. Where'd they go? I mean, we've got an obvious answer on where half of his martins went because there was a storm that directly led to the loss of those birds. But then what are some of the other conditions that people maybe find their colonies in that lead to fewer and fewer pair over the years, or maybe a complete loss of the colony? What do we usually ask folks?
So I think it's important every year to kind of evaluate the habitat of your colony. Do you have any trees that maybe when you first started your colony, maybe those trees have now gotten bigger and they're encroaching on the space of your housing? Purple martins don't really feel safe when there are trees real close by their houses because they can easily get ambushed by a bird of prey. So it's important to allow 40, 60 feet is best distance away from large trees. So that could be something that they don't feel safe to come back because you might have some encroaching trees. Another big one is if you've had any type of predation that previous year. Again, the martins aren't going to feel safe to come back, so it's really, really important that you have a predator baffle on your pole. Owl guards and hawk guards on the housing as well are important to add, but the baffle on the pole especially. I do hear from people time to time that you recommend the baffle and they say, I don't have raccoons
I
here.
got a dog. There's no snakes in my yard.
Yeah. But if you look at the range of where raccoons live, it completely overlaps with where the eastern purple martins live, and they are around in the evening, so you don't know you have raccoons because they're nocturnal, but you definitely have. There's all kinds of land predators, snakes. I talked to someone who had mink climb the pole and hurt their colony, so it's really important to put that predator baffle on the pole because it can just be one night to have a predator go up there and attack the nests, and the martins aren't going to feel safe to come nest there again. They might even mostly abandon it after that one event, but it's a big reason why they don't return again the following year. And then just make sure too that your housing standards are what the purple martins like. You want to have the proper cavity size that again makes them feel safe. If the cavities are too shallow, so there's some on the market where the cavities are only like 6 inches deep, and we do recommend expanding those to be 12 inches deep. So you might get like some small numbers nest, but then it's easy for a hawk or owl to reach into a cavity that's not deep and make them not want to come back again. So it's a lot of just making them feel safe and making it the best nesting space possible for them.
Keep sparrows and starlings away.
That's a big one.
Really, they just can't coexist. So some folks will think, there's always one nest that's got sparrows in it, and my martins get along with them just fine. That's great until the year that they don't, and then the sparrows are in there pecking eggs and killing adults. Even certainly starlings have no problem with those big beaks doing damage to purple martins as well. So really, you can't let sparrows or starlings get any foothold in your martin housing, or it will eventually lead to colony abandonment. It's with this situation, just reassess things. It's possible that there are hawks that have moved in and there's just more predation pressure. The one thing that we don't have the info on how big those houses are, so this colony got cut in half. But smaller colonies have a harder time, at least in certain parts of the range, surviving year to year. If you've just got a couple of nests and survival's poor, maybe the next year you only have one pair that comes back. And you can have these colonies that are small and they're just kind of on the brink of being there. Sometimes it just winks out altogether and then you're back to square one. So that might have been what happened in this situation as well. Difficult to say exactly, but just try to take a look at your colony with a neutral eye and figure out, am I doing everything that I'm supposed to be doing? And then sometimes it's just up to chance, unfortunately. If you're doing everything right, get the dawn song playing and try to attract more martins. Maybe you just need to sweeten the pot a little bit. Some of these questions here are similar topics. Brandon asked about people in suburban spots, any pushback from neighbors, or how to tips to keep it peaceful. That's a great question, and it's kind of loaded. I don't know why I just read it. No, I do, because I wanted to talk about this. Fences make good neighbors, but the purple martins go beyond those fences potentially. So I think the best way for people to have their neighbors embrace the purple martins is to engage them in it, if you can. You know, we got all kinds of neighbors out there, right? But if they're open to it, you know, showing the babies to their kids, or talking about the purple martins and how they eat lots of insects. You don't have to tell them they don't really eat mosquitoes. Just kind of engaging with the neighborhood and making everybody else love purple martins as much as you do, making it a big deal that you've got purple martins there and how cool it is. You'll have people that don't necessarily like purple martins, you know, the people that are afraid of birds or whatever, and you know, it can be difficult at times, and you know, being confrontational is probably not the best way to go about having a peaceful situation with neighbors and purple martins. There's a lot you can do. Purple martins are protected as long as they're nesting. Those nest boxes are not protected if the purple martins are not there. So don't go and start a fight with your neighbor, potentially, if you know, thinking that this purple martin housing is safe year round. They're legally protected only as long as the martins are there actively nesting. So just know that you're potentially hanging yourself out there for trouble if you go aggressively at the neighbors. Just know that there's some inherent vulnerability there in your purple martin colony. All right, let's go to another controversial question. Dale asked the best way to kill starlings. So starlings and house sparrows, like I said, cannot be allowed to nest with your martins. So the best way to deal with starlings is to not let them in there in the first place. So having starling resistant entrances, then this is all a moot point. But house sparrows will remain an issue potentially. And if you have entrances that starlings can get in, that can become an issue. So we recommend removal of the nests at the very least. But then in some cases you'll need to fall back to euthanasia of these invasive species. House sparrows and starlings, European starlings, are a European species that was introduced over here and competes with our native species. So
and they're not protected.
They're not protected under those same protections that our native species have. So we just recommend being as humane as possible, because that's just what we believe. So the way that we do it is by using carbon dioxide, and we actually have, an article maybe on our website about how to make a little portable carbon dioxide chamber to euthanize invasive birds. So you can certainly do that. We find that's a nice, quick and painless way to go. Other ways that are recommended are cervical dislocation. That one requires a little bit of practice to do just right, but it's a quick euthanasia technique of these species. But certainly shooting is something that is legal depending on your community that you live in. And that's something that a lot of people fall back on because it's quick and it's at a distance. You don't have to deal with traps. But if you're trapping, those two techniques that I mentioned are probably the most humane ways to go. There's another bird flu question. Sherry asks, if there's another large surge of deaths, would you want them collected and sent in for examination? So she's not referring to the bird flu thing, because like I said, purple martins aren't really affected by that. Sherry actually, I believe, participated in a research project that we launched after the large-scale kill of purple martins in Texas and Louisiana a few years ago, in February of 21 maybe.
Yeah, any winter storm.
Yeah, big late winter storm. That was the big one that like just absolutely ravaged Texas, and everybody had huge property damage from it. People actually died from it. There was the big power grid failure that associated with that. But we at that point we contacted the Purple Martin landlords across the South, and we had them collect these frozen birds for research purposes. We were trying to make the most of a terrible situation. So she's basically asking if that happens again, do we want the birds? Yeah, we don't have any plan on expanding that research with another batch of birds, I guess. Actually, that research it's been submitted for publication, so we'll be able to share the results of that study sometime soon in our magazine, hopefully, once it gets approved and published. That's a little plug there for being a PMCA member. If you get a membership with the PMCA, you get our quarterly magazine that we're really, really proud of. And Lydia, who's behind the scenes right here, is our new editor of the magazine, and we all put a lot of work into it. And we're proud of it. And that's one of the ways that we share the results of some of the research that we do. It's full of tips about taking care of purple martins, cool stories, nice pictures. It's a nice periodical that we put out. There's another nest parasite question. We covered that. I think we covered most of this. Lydia, do we have questions from the chat?
Mm-hmm.
All right, let's hit them up here.
Yeah, I'm nearing 2:00. It's 1:54.
Yeah.
Just so you're aware. Also, I don't know if you want to mention, but David and Debbie, two different people, donated $20 while on this.
Hey,
So
thank you, David and Debbie, for
their
donating
donations.
to our fundraiser that is in the corner of the chat, right?
Yeah.
That's fantastic. Thank
Yeah.
you so much.
All right. One person asked, do they need to play the dawn song and use decoys if they had martins last year?
Okay, good question. You guys may not have heard that. The question is, do you need to play the dawn song and use decoys if you had martins last year? There's no harm in it. We have active colonies here that we still use the dawn song at. Really just kind of, for colonies that aren't full, why not?
Probably depends on the size of your colony.
Yeah. If you've got room to grow, especially if you're those early stages of starting a colony, you had a couple pair, keep using the dawn song until you've got like a thriving colony. Because, like I said, a couple of bad years in a row and you're back down to 0 birds if you just have a small colony. So, if you can get away with playing the dawn song, if your neighbors don't get crazy from it, let it rip.
We also had a couple of repeated questions previously that about when to put up their martin housing, and is it ever too late to put up their martin housing?
Okay, questions about when to put up martin housing, and is it ever too late to put up martin housing? Do you have the
timing?
Yeah, that one. All right, so this is our scout arrival map. Figure out where you're at on there, and that color is basically when the first adults arrive to your area, on average. So you certainly, if you have an active colony, you absolutely want to have your housing up and at least some compartments open by the dates shown on this map. If you don't have, if you're starting a new colony or you didn't have martins last year, it doesn't hurt to have things open at this time, but usually it's the subadults that are the ones that start new colonies, and those add maybe a month and a half, so 4 to 6 weeks onto this. That's probably a rule of thumb when you're going to get martins. Can you go back to the scout arrival map?
Mm-hmm.
And we'll show the little yellow dots coming up.
Sorry, I zoomed way far.
All right. So you can see here, we got our purple dots, which are adults, and you can see the yellow dots just starting to come up. So these are the subadults, the ones that were born last year. Those are the ones that are going to be starting new colonies. Back out farther.
Yeah, I'm just
Shows
trying to
it
make sure
better.
they can see things.
And are these sub-adults, or these are all legit? These higher ones?
I believe so, yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, so you can see that some colonies that are particularly older, sometimes they'll get their sub-adults earlier. But as a rule, sub-adults are kind of about here right now. And those are gonna be the ones that you wanna have your housing up absolutely sure to get to have available when the sub-adults come and are looking for new housing sites. And then as far as is it ever too late to put up housing? No, actually, it may be too late for nesting for the particular season that we're in, but after the birds fledge in that little period of time before they head south, they're kind of scoping out the area and just mentally noting where purple martin houses are that they may want to check out the following year. You may have birds stop by at the end of the season, even if you didn't have birds nesting. That's a great sign. So yeah, we recommend having housing up, even if you didn't get the birds this year, or if you got the housing late, put it up until fall. Give the martins a chance to check it out.
Right. Donna asked, she's had martins come through her colony, but none ever stay. She also has sparrows trying to cohabitate. What should she do?
All right. Donna says she's had martins come through her site, but have never stayed, and she has house sparrows trying to cohabitate. Yeah, we just, I don't know that it's necessarily a coincidence that you've got sparrows and you don't have martins, or the martins have come by and encountered those sparrows and then have moved on. So you really can't let that be. So before you have martins there, if you've got a big sparrow problem, keep pulling the nests out. Sometimes you have to do as much as just closing up your housing until the sparrows move on and then reopening it. That's one way to do it. Yeah, they just, if you let the house sparrows get a hold of your housing, especially if your martins haven't arrived yet, or if you're just trying to attract them, it doesn't work.
We have someone, Brandon in Connecticut, has tree swallows nesting at his colony site, and has not been able to get martins to nest there.
All right, Brandon in Connecticut has tree swallows nesting in his martin site. Mercedes, you want to take this one?
Sure. So tree swallows are one of our native birds, and they also like to nest in cavities like purple martins do. So they are kind of a competitor for nesting space with purple martins. So we talked earlier about keeping your housing closed before your martins get there. So that is a way to prevent tree swallows from moving in before your martins get here, because they actually do migrate a little earlier than the purple martins. So keeping your housing closed is really important to keep some of these native birds out before your martins get there. But they'll go to a single nesting box if you put that like 30 feet away from your martin house. They can live near each other, but they can't live in the same house. The tree swallows are really territorial and they will chase off your martins when they get there. But closing up your house and then providing that single nest box nearby for them, they typically will move into that and then you're all good. But it's really important to get them to move out before they do start nesting, because tree swallows, like we said, are a native species that are protected. So if they lay eggs, you cannot touch that nest. So that goes the same with the bluebirds, are kind of the same story. So it's important to kick them out when they have interest than when they actually start nesting.
Yeah. So at each of our colonies here at the state park where we do our research, we have 2 bluebird houses. Mm-hmm. One for a tree swallow pair, one for a bluebird pair if we are lucky enough to get both. And they're nearby the martin housing, but not right next to it, because they just can't live that close to martins where they're like in the gourd next door or the cavity next door. But a little farther away, and they actually help to keep other tree swallows and other bluebirds away. They kind of patrol that area, including your martin housing, to keep the tree swallows and bluebirds away. So you can actually recruit them to be on your side, but if they've taken an interest in your martin housing, really closing up that housing and offering this alternate site, and once they move over to that, then reopening the housing. Sometimes that's the worst possible time, like you've closed it up because of the tree swallows and there are martins hanging around, and it's like, oh my gosh, I wish I could just open it up. But the tree swallows are a little bit too intense with their territoriality, that you just have to wait until they moved out, because they're protected, and they're great species, just like our purple martins that we love so much. They just they just need to be at a little bit of a distance.
Yeah, and if you have the space, I recommend putting up a bluebird tree swallow box, because it's really enjoyable to have those birds on your property too. And like we said, they kind of live happily with the purple martins nearby, just not in the house.
Yeah. I mean, they're really cool birds to watch. And then like you could do nest checks on those nests too. You see bluebirds with their little fuzzy heads when they're born. You can have them all. All right, what's up?
It's 2:04. I have one more question. I think
Yeah,
that's
one
good.
more.
David asked, he's had round entrance holes for years, but if he changes them to a crescent entrance to keep out the starlings, will the martins adapt to the new entrance holes?
Okay, David has had round entrances for years. He's asking if he switches over to starling resistant, will the martins, how will they react to that? I would say it's probably best to do this in phases, would be my guess. Maybe do half of your martin housing swapped over to starling resistant. Like I said, it's best to just have everything starling resistant, but there's plenty of round stuff out there. And don't be surprised if the martins used all those round holes first. Like I said, they're just like us. They're going to do the easiest thing. So, you're going to think, I have made a huge mistake, but they will use the martin housing, or the starling resistant housing as well. But just try not to obsess over it. And then, maybe the following year, do half of what's left, and then maybe go ahead and do all the rest of them in that third year, if you're willing to do it in phases. If you're willing to, if you need to do it all in 1 year, then that's what you need to do if you got like huge starling problems. But probably the easiest way to do it would be to do, in phases like that. So, any other questions from chat?
That's most of them, yeah.
Awesome.
And shout out to Tara, who's been also answering
Yeah.
questions in chat as
Yeah,
well.
Tara.
Thanks, Tara.
Tara has been in chat helping out, and did we have our moderators in there as well? From
I think Bees has been a moderator before,
Okay.
but none other that I
okay.
recognize. Kala was in here at one
My
point.
daughter was in here. Yeah, she said she was going to stop by. I told her to not say anything stupid. She was saying,
No,
yeah.
she was being very smart.
Awesome. Hello, Calla, if you're still watching. All right. With that, I think that's it. So hopefully everybody enjoyed this, got their questions answered, and hope everybody's birds are back.
I want to show, because it's only been the top
It's
half.
only
You
been
might
the
need
top.
to stand up and
Yeah,
show
we got a new shirt available in our Amazon shop. Real men love pretty purple birds. So if you have manly men in your life that also love purple martins, and you can embrace that kind of dichotomy there. I don't know. It came to me in a dream to make this shirt. So some of the shirt designs do that. But yeah, so that'll be available in our Amazon store, which if you go to our regular store and click on the header, you can get to our Amazon merch shop. There's just all the stuff on the Amazon shop is print to order, so we don't have to stock it and kind of prepay. So that's handled a little bit differently than our regular shop. And this shirt is, I think it's pending. I don't know. It might,
Yeah,
if you don't
it's
see it right away when you get there, take a look
Give it
later
a-
tonight or
yeah.
tomorrow if you really need this shirt. I hope everybody had a good time. We'll be back and do this another time soon. And what's our sign up?
What was it? Keep flying up.
This time. Okay. All right, everybody.
Keep flying high.
And we'll see you next time.
Are we supposed to thumbs up?
I don't know.
Turn it off.
I was just freezing. I figured Tara was gonna shut off. Thanks everybody. We'll see you later.
Nobody to stop this.
Yeah.